Hey guys, I'm back again and I'm here to do my February wrap up. So it's crazy how it just feels like we just got into 2025 and it just seems to be rolling like steamrolling through already. So I'm here in my craft room. The sun is shining. It's only 14 degrees Celsius here in Normandy, and I am thrilled about that. So now I can get back in them streets and walking. So while I'm contemplating the good weather and all of that, I'm going to come and talk to you today about what I read last month. So last month, as you know, was Black History Month in the U.S. Read So Lit, that is talking about Black American writers, was where I was at last month. And so I have a plethora of books here. Not too many, just enough. So we're going to start with the non-American writers that I read last month, because as you know, I'm reading a French book a month with my friend Anna. And so the first book that we read was this one right here, which is Gaël Faye, Petit. So this was our second French book of the year. Fantastic read. Big 5 stars. I highly recommend this one. If you didn't catch my review, it's here. I'll link it below, and you can hear more about what I thought about Petit by Gaël Faye, which in English is translated to Small Country. Okay, the next book I read last month was this one right here, which is called Tumbling by Diane Whetstone. This is her debut novel. Last year, I had the pleasure of reading Lazaretto and Leaving Cecil Street. Both of those, I think Leaving Cecil Street is somewhere in the 90s, a little bit after this one, maybe second or third novel. And Lazaretto came out just recently. I think it was 2018 or 19, if I'm not mistaken. So this is Tumbling, her debut novel, and it is the story of Noon and Herbie. Noon and Herbie, they meet and they decide to get married, but lo and behold, they are not able to consummate their marriage. Noon is harboring a mysterious secret, which is the reason why they aren't able to consummate their marriage, but she will not tell Herbie what it is. So Herbie then seeks solace outside of their marriage, and one night he comes home and there's a baby on the doorstep. So that's how this one starts. Now, if you want to know more about what I think about Tumbling, I'll link it below. My blog post review, my first book review of the year on my blog, link below. You can get all the juiciness about what I think about this one. Okay, the next book I read was this one right here, which is the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. This was the Normandy book club that I run here where I live. This was our read for the month of February, and this book was fantastic. I didn't know what to expect because the last book I tried to pick up by James McBride was Deacon King Kong, and I tried to read that. It was during the pandemic. We were locked down, and I was not having, all these characters being introduced all in one go. It just was not working for me. This one, this book does a similar thing. It introduces a character every chapter, but it was so good. So the story begins, and I think it's supposed to be 1970s, and there is a skeleton that is found in the bottom of a well in the neighborhood of Chicken Hill. So Chicken Hill is it was an immigrant neighborhood back in the 20s and 30s. So you had immigrants coming from all over the world, immigrating to the U.S., bringing their baggage and their language. and some of them arrived on Chicken Hill and were living also with African Americans, Jews, etc., etc. And this is a testament, the story is a testament of the difficulty, the support, lack of support, racism, classism, all kinds of different isms happening in the book, in this particular neighborhood called Chicken Hill. And it explores all of the things that are a testament of what did happen to immigrants that came over at this time period, and also a testament of what could be happening today with immigrants that come over to get a better life. But I like the aspect of community in the book, and James McBride does a wonderful job of linking these two together, while at the same time giving the reader some suspense that goes along the way about this skeleton that is found at the beginning of the novel. Now, a lot of people are going to have trouble with this one for the reasons I stated in the beginning, is that there are new characters introduced almost every chapter. And it can be a little bit overwhelming. I'm not gonna lie. But what I did was I focused more on the story and less on worrying about how many characters were introduced every chapter. What I did was I just let the story take me along. And that's basically what it did, because I completely got, completely obsessed by the character of Shona, the character of Nate, and the story just rolled. I highly recommend you read this one if you haven't read it. It's really a book that reflects some of the issues that we're having today in the U.S., some of the reasons why we are gone astray in our country is because we have forgotten what our country was supposed to be about. But be that as it may, give James McBride's The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store a try. Very well written book. Fantastic read. I gave this one a 5-star. I loved it so much. Okay, the next book on my list was this one right here, which is called A Different Drummer. And this one, it was a book that I had already read a couple of years ago for a podcast, the episode that I did with my buddy Christy, and we decided to read A Different Drummer, and we were both floored about how good the novel was. Now, this is a story of Tucker Caliban, who is a Black man who, at the beginning of the novel, we see him salt his land, shoot his animals, set fire to his house, pack his stuff up and his wife, his pregnant wife, and they ride out of town, never to be heard from again. And from Tucker Caliban doing this action, it drove other people to do the same. So in this small town, this southern town, which is not really named, we have all these other Black people are packing their stuff and leaving. They're either leaving by train, by cart, however they can, on foot. They too are following the footsteps of Tucker Caliban. The thing about this novel is it's recounted through the voices of white people. It's a book that's told from multiple points of view, but all these points of view are white characters. Now, you might say, well, that sounds odd, and where do Black people come in this story? Well, basically what it does is it shows us how much Black people are invisible for the white characters in this book. And not only that, but like how little they know of Black people. And the more that the story is told through the eyes of these white people, the more the real story of Black people shines through, in spite their words being more surrounding what's happening to them. I tell you, this book is so fantastic. I was so thrilled to read it for a second time because this was a Read So Lit book club on Patreon's read for February. And reading it for a second time just made me love it even more than I loved it the first time. But I highly recommend you check out A Different Drummer by William Melvin Kelly. It is quite the short novel, but it packs a big, big punch. Okay, the next book I picked up was this one right here, which is Country Place by Petry. This is my first Petry. This was the Read So Lit read-along book for February that I do with Michael and Tatiana. And I absolutely thought this book was intriguing and so good. Now, it was giving me, if you can believe it or not, it was giving me Daphne du Maurier vibes. I can't explain why, but it was giving me that. And I can't say much about this book other than the fact that it begins with a young man who has come back from war. He's been away at war for 4 years, and he's very excited to, come back and be with his wife. Now, that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. It is a book that dabbles in racism, classism, sexism, just a lot of isms as well. But it's done in a very delicate manner. It's classy, Ann Petry is telling this story in a very literary fiction-esque kind of way, but it is very intriguing. The characters are all very interesting. Even the minor characters are interesting, and that's not always the case in books. Usually, you focus only on those main characters, but some of these minor secondary characters are a mess. But I highly recommend you read this. Country Place isn't one of the novels that people talk a lot about for Ann Petry. The one that most people talk about is The Street. But I would recommend that reading Country Place is, another added feather to her cap. And it's one that readers should definitely not ignore. And last but not least, I read Balm by Dolen Perkins-Valdez. Now, this is Perkins-Valdez's sophomore book, and it has been out since, I think, is it 2016? I think it is, if I'm not mistaken, 2015. And I'm finally getting to it. Thank you, Jesus. And I am not disappointed. Balm is a book that I would call a slow burn. So this is a book that begins with a young woman who is newly married and has newly become a widow. It seems like all in one breath, basically. And so she's arriving in the home that she would have gone to meet her husband. But she is alone in this home, and she's there with servants. So she has Olga, a woman who is her maid and cook, and cleaner. And then she also has like a driver and a gardener, and she's living in the house on her own. Now, the woman, when she arrives, the first thing she realizes is that her husband had not made any concessions for her coming. Like, he didn't even make a room that could have been decorated to the likings of a young woman. Everything was very much like he had wanted it to be. And so she lives out the beginnings of widowhood alone in this big house and not really knowing what to do with herself. And then one day she hears a voice. That's all I'm going to say. I found this book such an interesting way of talking about life, like right after the Civil War. So, like, ink hasn't even dried on all of the laws of whatever around slavery, but, you know, slavery is supposed to be out. Um, and we get an array of characters where we see the exploration of life at this time period. That is from a woman's point of view, from a Black man's point of view, a Black woman's point of view, but also you get this difficulty of missing people, trying to find them, trying to find your way in a place that made no room for you as a Black person, or even room for you as a woman. And as you're reading, you see how Perkins-Valdez tries to parallel the difficulties between being a young widow and a young Black woman who is a free Black person, and the difficulty that she's having. They have similar difficulties without really knowing it, or without really understanding it. And not only that, but the historical side, where they discuss a lot of how life is being lived, what people believe, what is the real state of affairs for free Black people. It's just a really, really good book. I highly recommend it. It's one of those reads. I found it to be quite a quick read. It may seem like nothing is happening, but stuff is happening, and you really have to dig deep and try to understand what Dolen Perkins-Valdez is saying with a book like Balm. Like, she's saying a lot without seeming like she's saying a lot. I highly recommend this one. I think I gave this one 4 stars. It's surprisingly good. Her writing is just, oh my God, so, so good. Now, I read Wench back in the day. I don't know when that was. That was like around 2012 or something, 13. And I really enjoyed Wench. And this one, I really enjoyed it as well. But I can feel how her writing has evolved over time. And that makes me so, so, so happy. So I'm looking forward to picking up next is Take My Hand. But I know she has a book coming out this year called Happy Land, and I think it's coming out very soon. So I might need to get to Take My Hand real quick so I can then get to Happy Land. So Balm, highly recommend it. So those were all of the books that I read this month. I didn't read a lot of books, but I sure did read a lot of good books. Like, there isn't a dud in here, really. I mean, if I'd have to say the book that I had like more issues with than any other ones would have to be Tumbling, but that's just because it was a debut novel. Debut novels always have some little issues with them. But as a whole, this is a great stack of books. I was happy to have read as much as this because I just never know how many books I'm going to be able to read in a month, because my teaching schedule just doesn't allow me to read, like 15 books a month, unless for some reason I am not working. So there you have it. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know below if any of these are on your list, or you have read them and you enjoyed them as well. Stay tuned for more videos. I know I've been a little MIA for the past couple weeks, but like I said, I have been reading and working. But I will be back very soon with another video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.